Dear ladies and gentlemen, partners and friends, I was just speaking to the colleague on my side that to take the stage after Bill Gates, it seems that the most reasonable thing I can do is try not to trip over by entering the stage. So hopefully the beginning of the speech is going well already, and I'm going to try to pick this up from this moment on. And as introduced, I am a Minister of Economy and Innovation from Lithuania, and I have the pleasure to represent a country which has repeatedly shown that it can do more than just survive those uncertain times that we have been continuing to talk about during this conference yesterday and today. And this country can grow through it. And today we face the world where all the old rules of our economic engagement are shifting. In this context, I'm very happy to say that Lithuania is offering something which is quite rare. It is offering speed, it is offering reliability, and offering strategic clarity. And over the last 3 decades, I'm very happy to say that Lithuania has emerged as a country defined not by crisis, but how it responds to those crises. And after reclaiming our independence, as you all know, in the 1990s, we have rebuilt our economic model. And we did that not through protectionism, but we did that through openness, reform, and innovation. And each disruption since then, whether that was financial, geopolitical, or health-related, it has become a catalyst for transformation. Therefore, I'm very happy to use the stage today to really work on our guiding principle. And I think it is very applicable to all of us around the world, and especially in Europe. So when the world is shaking, we have to adapt and we have to innovate. And I want to prove this point by sharing 3 little moments when Lithuania turned a global shock into a long-term strength. And hopefully that will be an exciting insight for us during the panel discussion. So first of all, you all know this very well. In 2008, when financial crisis hit, it hit our global markets hard. In many countries, banks retrenched, innovation has stalled. But in Lithuania, we took a different path. We used this moment and we chose to build. We created a regulatory sandbox for fintech innovations, we simplified licensing procedures, and invested in digital infrastructure. Because of that strategic foresight, it turned us into one of the EU top destinations for fintech licensing. Today, over 250 fintech companies are located in Lithuania and call Lithuania home, and also that includes Revolut's European headquarters. And I think our success in this space demonstrates the ability to act fast, collaborate with private sector, and of course position ourselves ahead of that curve, very actual to today's. Secondly, COVID pandemic has tested our nation's resilience, and Lithuania's life sciences sector has passed with distinction. Thanks to the 2 decades of steady investment, when the pandemic hit, our biotech sector has grew almost 90% in 1 year. And now this helps us as a country to see this as a next potential to have a bold vision of 5% of GDP from life sciences by 2030. And thirdly, Russia's war in Ukraine has reshaped our continent, and Lithuania responded not with fear, but with resolve. We have decided to increase our spending to defense between 5% and 6% of GDP. We have launched our national initiative with multi-million national defense industry acceleration plan. And we are building domestic capabilities in drone technology, dual-use technology, secure communications, AI-driven defense solutions. But not only that. More importantly, it allowed us to collaborate with such defense industry giants as Rheinmetall to build artillery shell factory in Lithuania. And this is something which is happening in the region, in our region. In the next 2 to 3 years, we will see, to my understanding, a new European defense industry ecosystem taking shape. And of course, all those 3 years have shown us that if you boil it down, those 30 years of our experience, you will see that when the world shakes, you don't have to panic, and you have to innovate. It is now for Europe, to my understanding, to take action about this new reality of global instability. And you all know it, and we discussed it yesterday and today. From US and China tech rivalry, to Russia's war in Ukraine, to Middle East tensions, to US tariffs. All of those are the new reality. And in this reality, we in Lithuania are doing the same as before. Next week, the Parliament will be voting on a bill which we put forward, which cut red tape and reduces procedures 10 times, not 10%. This is something which we believe is critical. If you want to build something, you have to be able to build it not in 3 years from today, but in 3 months from today. That is something which is critical for Lithuania. That is something which is critical for Germany and Europe. So we are doing so, and we believe that the world in this instability needs a reliable partner with fast and simple procedures. That is something we see that in the future, we all have to focus on our high value-added production, manufacturing, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and you have to do it focusing your response accordingly. Therefore, when you think about Europe, once had unmatched industrial capacity, and we still have that muscle memory that still is within us. Therefore, we need to now move our strategic focus and determination and move from global instability into European strategic autonomy. Thank you. I look forward to a discussion on what exactly is the solution in the discussion following. Thank you.
So we're going to open up the round to Daniel Schall. He's CEO of Black Semiconductors, Heike Freund, Chief Operating Officer of Marvel Fusion, and Irene Römelhoff, she's Executive Vice President of Equinor. Welcome. I'm not quite sure if you noticed, but when you said you want to build something in 3 months, but in 3 years, there was like a movement somewhere. Everyone here, it was just like, how on earth do you manage to do that?
Well, this is something which we as a team have been in the first months of our office. We've been a little bit afraid to speak about this out loud, but after 6 months, things are now in the final stages of the bill being discussed, and hopefully the Parliament will be voting on it for the first time tomorrow, and on Monday next week for a final vote. So if this passes through, we will have something which we call an investment highway. And that means if you are a company in the defense field, if you're a company as a strategic investment of a size or working in one of our 3 economic zones, that is exactly what you get. Because something which we realize that in this world of instability, time is most precious. So that means everything has to be put in line just as quickly as possible with a clear focus that this institutions are determined to make sure that those investments are not going somewhere outside Europe. They have to go to Europe because this is the place for it. So this is not an option for us to discuss. This is something we have to get done.
What about everyone who says like, yeah, but we need to check it first and we need to make, I don't know, like we need to gather data to make sure that all our decisions are on point and we need to make sure that it's insured enough and whatever. What are you doing with those people in between?
So we are saying this is exactly what you need to do in those 3 months. This is exactly what you need to do.
So you're still doing it, you're just doing it much faster. So for a company like Marvel Fusion, that must sound like, I don't know, like Christmas.
Yeah, I guess you need to translate those 3 months always to the relevant technology, right? And maybe 3 months in software is 3 years in deep tech hardware. But I fully agree with you. Like, speed is important, and especially here in Europe, I think we can become a lot faster, and we should work on these things. And that is when it comes to regulation, that is when it comes to funding, that is when it comes to partnerships. And I think if we handle those right, then we can really build the next deep tech champions here in Europe.
But everyone, every time someone says we have to, it means we not, you know, because that's something we need to work on. So if you think about the situation, especially when you look to Lithuania, and you've been very active in Germany for the past years because your company, Marvel Fusion, is working on a technology that actually now also has been very noticed by the new government as one of the key features that we could have in Germany. Do you feel like that's still a good place for you to grow a company like yours, Germany? Because we do not have that speed right now.
Actually, it's not only been the new government, but also Bill Gates just said here on stage that fusion energy will be the cheapest energy on this planet. So I think we all should have the ambition to build fusion companies here in Germany. And with regards to the new government, I really like the ambition of the new government that in the coalition contract, they want to build the first fusion reactor globally in Germany. And I think it always starts with having the right ambition, right? And that's the ambition, I think, that was missing in Germany and Europe for a long time, like really saying, hey, we want to be the first and we want to be the leader in something, and we're still the third biggest economy globally, so we should also say we want to be the first in building a fusion reactor. So I think that's, it always starts with the ambition, and the ambition is right, and it's not only saying in the coalition contract we want to have the first fusion reactor, but it's also saying we want to put a regulation in place, not regulating fusion like fission, which is super important. We want to put milestone-based funding in place. All of that is perfect. I think on the ambition level, now it really comes down on like putting that into really concrete plans and programs and so on, and that's something we are working on with the government right now, and I think that's where the truth really will come out, whether we are able to transform this ambition into action. We are ready, the companies here in Germany are ready, and I think now we all need to work together to make it happen.
So how confident are you? Because the thing is, it's like, especially like the point that you're describing right now, that's the point where, sorry to say, we usually, in Germany, not usually, that's not true, but sometimes fail, you know? That's a point where we have a great vision and then, oh, are we trying to build an airport, you know? That takes forever. I'm from Cologne, we tried to build an opera for years, but that's a whole different story. But you know what I mean? Like, this aside, when it comes down to actually operating, it's not working. So are you confident that those visions are actually coming true?
So I think it's also important to note that there is a lot of things we need to do. So this will not come by just saying we want to have the first fusion reactor in Germany and then the first fusion reactor will be here, right? If I look at one example of funding, of the global private funding that has been invested in private fusion companies, less than 4% globally has been invested within the EU. And that cannot be our fair share. I would love to see 20%, 30% of global capital coming into the EU, right? So that's a topic that needs to be addressed. And if we don't close that funding gap, especially when it comes to scale-up rounds, we won't be able to achieve this. Second thing is partnerships. I think especially here in Germany, we still think very monolithically about like there is academia, there are startups, there's politics, there is industry or big industry, and we need to collaborate a lot more between those sectors to make it happen. And then there's the whole topic of regulation. And I think if we don't fix those points, then we won't be able to achieve that ambition. But I have never been as confident as today that we will be able. No, because I think the stars never aligned so nicely of like Ursula von der Leyen saying in Davos, fusion is a topic where Europe needs to be leading. Now the government having it in the coalition contract. So I would say the time has never been as good as now, but we now also need to translate it into action.
Mm-hmm. Does it go for, please? Does it go for black semiconductor as well? Because semiconductors did have, like the stars aligned for semiconductors very well at some stage last year. And now this year, it doesn't look so good for some companies. And some of the ambitions that we had for Europe and Germany have not gone through. What is your view on this?
Faster is better, that's clear. And I remember somebody saying, if you think you have it under control, you're not moving fast enough. So that 3 month thing here is really, really critical. And data is very important, but sometimes you have to live with only a reduced amount of data and draw your conclusion and then move on. And rather make sure that, and that's where a lot of my work goes, make sure you enable the organization to make the right decisions among all these micro decisions that everybody can take all the time, that they mostly align. They're not all correct, but they mostly align. So overall, it accumulates to a huge progress over time. And if you want to change a relatively complex system, like a data center, especially a large data center, then it's very clear that it's not a one thing, one day it will be there, and then you switch it on, and it's a progression, and that's the interaction that has to happen in the industry. And this is where we are actually benefiting dramatically from the developments, because we have a new technology, we are independent from what happens today. We have a fresh idea, and we start from there.
But you have made, someone else would say, a brave decision, because we just spoken about deep tech. I mean, like, it was always, I mean, I remember, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, always been said, like, oh, software is easy, software gets money, but deep tech, you know, deep tech is difficult, and deep tech doesn't get enough money, and, you know, and then we had the semiconductor crisis that obviously gave you a push, but on the question of are we actually going to solve the sovereignty problem of Europe on that case, I'm not quite sure right now if we have a good stand.
You know, our public-funded project is called BRAVE. I don't think it was a brave decision. It was, from an engineering perspective, it was a necessity and it was an opportunity. So this goes over a long, long time. So the research for what we do started in 2006. Funded basically entirely by German and European funding programs. It's a European material. We work with one layer of carbon atoms, which is a new thing in the semiconductor industry, and that's why we start from a fresh field, because this is new. New material, new opportunities, and that's actually what went very, very well in the European research ecosystem, because they kept on funding this. There was a lot of money over a long time. And this was the key, a lot of money and a 10-year duration, so that you can develop that ecosystem that somebody can then build on and commercialize. So I think this is the advantage that we have. We don't copy existing technology, which is very, very capital intensive. But we take something new that solves an existing problem that could not be, from a physics perspective, could not be solved with the existing technology. Even if you want, you can't solve it. You take our technology or it won't be solved. So this is and it took a while to identify exactly that point where you say, okay, this is why we will win, and this is very clear.
So you were Europe's new NVIDIA?
Say again?
Are you Europe's new NVIDIA?
No. We help NVIDIA and AMD and the others to perform even better.
Okay, but from a money perspective, you could be the next new tech company of Europe.
We're working on it. Certainly, that's the ambition. Is, of course, you have to be aware of what money is actually good for. Money is the energy that flows through that organization, that helps creating that possibility. In the end, it's everybody that can use different software services on their phones, because in the background that whole machine is working much better. So this is the benefit to the society, and we don't waste terawatt hours for energy in energy, because we need per data center one nuclear power plant, but all of a sudden we need maybe a tenth of a nuclear power plant.
And we all know, like, power, especially in the digitalized AI world, is very, very important. Where we come to you at Equinor. Equinor has actually been described in the media as being brave lately, because you have made the decision to move away from oil and go more into renewables. Why did you make that decision? Was it clearly because, was it just because it's obviously better for the world? But was it also the idea that we need the sovereignty in Europe? What made you make that decision?
Well, I think the decision that was made back in 2013-14, it was in the run-up to Paris, and we also saw at the same time that the cost of alternative energy sources like solar and wind were coming down very, very rapidly. And we recognize that as an oil and gas company, we've been part of the problem, but we also have a lot of competence, so we can be part of the solution. So we decided to develop a new strategy, and that was based on our existing competence, using it in new areas. So we are the largest offshore oil and gas operator in the world. Offshore wind made a lot of sense, so we're one of the leading companies in offshore wind these days. We had 30 years of experience from storing CO2. We have a lot of gas processing plants, so CCS, hydrogen, blue hydrogen development was also a very natural part of our competence and capacity set. So we saw opportunities, and we went after them with old, I guess, competence.
So it always sounds so obvious to say, like, there was an opportunity and we went after it, but a lot of times it doesn't really work. Where were problems that you've seen along your way that needed to be addressed when actually changing a strategy to something that you feel like it's more for the future?
Well, the huge dilemma we're facing every day is that the margins within the renewable business have been very tiny, and they've been negative, I would argue, for a time. And it's really hard to find good commercial opportunities within that space right now. Basically, every renewable technology needs some kind of subsidies, and that subsidy missing money gap has increased with the inflation, whereas oil and gas business is thriving really, really well these days. So how do we balance our capital distribution between investing in new technologies that are very marginal at best versus continuing to invest in oil and gas that clearly the world needs? And after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, we overnight became the biggest supplier of energy to Europe, and that's a big responsibility, and we need to maintain that production because there's obvious that Europe and the rest of the world needs it.
When the finances so obviously are against that strategy right now, I have to say, how do you explain that you stick to it? How do you explain it to your employees, to investors, to other companies, why you're still sticking to that strategy? Because you could just say, like, I'll move back. Because that's what the US did, right? The US just said, we're over it. We have seen in France a movement against it. Like, why are you still sticking to it, and how do you explain it?
We are sticking to the strategy, but we have redefined the pace of the different elements in the strategy, acknowledging that the energy transition is going to come later than we anticipated. So our ambition was to spend in 2030 50% of our investments in new technology or clean technologies and 50% in oil and gas. We see now that the opportunity set is just too limited for that to happen. So unfortunately, and I say that from the depth of my heart, we had to delay the energy transition elements of our strategy somewhat, but we're on it and we're going to get there. But it does take longer because it does require more subsidies, and I can be open about that, from governments to go through this transition.
Mm-hmm. You wanted to add something?
If I may, I think something which always helps to relate how important it is to stick to your strategies. It's something when you have no option but to stick to your strategy. So Lithuania, as a country, we had the situation of energy dependency on Russia, and we had the strategic decision to cut all the ties as possible. And in terms of electricity, we had to move into the only source we had, and that was renewables. So last year, we produced 70% of what our electricity needs are just from renewables, and we are on a strategic path within the next 3 to 4 years to reach 100% coming from renewables, matching our national electricity needs. And that is something which still has a lot of challenges, both price and balancing and many, many other aspects. But I think from this perspective, what we do, we invest into technology first. We are one of a few solar panel manufacturers still present, and we're working with large-scale contributors and partners who are going to look into our offshore wind park as well. So I think this is something as an interesting example on which you can rely on to say, in this challenging time, and competitiveness is the central issue, how can you still maintain that strategy?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm very happy to be on stage here with the minister from Lithuania, because Equinor has played an important role in the energy transition, I guess, or the energy diversification of Lithuania. Because I think if you want strategic autonomy, you need to make sure you have your own energy through renewables, but you also need to have a backup and diversity. So I guess back in 2014, you inaugurated, I guess, the first LNG terminal, and you called it Independence, which I thought was really appropriate. And we delivered the first LNG cargo, and we've since been really good cooperation partners. And the importance of gas in the energy transition cannot be underestimated. And I think we see the recognition of that also in Germany. You can only have a certain amount of saturation of renewables before you need to have backup capacities. Batteries can maybe cover hourly swings, but if you need to go beyond hourly intermittency, you need either coal-fired power plants or gas-fired power plants. And I think if you are to choose, I think we all would choose gas because it reduces emissions with 50%. And lately we made an investment decision on CCGT with carbon capture and storage, which actually makes the perfect companion to renewables. Mm-hmm. So.
When you have decided to make that decision to, I mean, for Germany, like just imagine the new coalition would say, like, we're going to go 100% into renewables. What would happen? Like in this room, you all would be scared because we're not quite sure if the electricity would be stable enough, would be cheap enough, whatever. How did you explain to the companies of Lithuania that this strategy would work?
Well, this is something which I really like to share as a story because it's a collaboration with the private sector. Because our private sector is the one which is engaging us with that technology. We have a large company, which is a European company now, not only producing solar panels, not only for Lithuania, but also we have facilities in other European countries. So we're one of those few countries which are actually fully in the strategy, not only as a public sector strategy, but also private company engaging in it and engaging with that technology, developing it and manufacturing it and providing it as a service. So I think this is something where there's a lot of collaboration as well, but at the same time, it is a strategy which came out of a necessity. Mm-hmm. Because what was the only other option is to depend on energy source coming from someone who can manipulate politically. And that was something which is even worse in terms of stability. So I think our businesses are the ones who realize that this is a strategy of necessity. This is a strategy of technological development. This is a strategy which provides our technological opportunities to develop, innovate, and provide those not only for your Lithuanian market, for a global and European market as well. And I think this is where a lot of synergies happen. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are still many, many challenges. I think I speak to my colleague, Minister of Energy, daily, and the main issue is now to make sure that we get the balancing right. Because it's on the daily picture, when we're going to have a lot of sun and a lot of wind, then some days will be excellent. But other days, when there's so many clouds and there's no wind, then there will be a lot of challenges.
We'll be there to help you out.
Yes. And especially when we're talking to big tech companies who are looking at data center locations in Lithuania. So then, that is also a little bit of an issue on us on how to work it out. But I think we are on a good path, and so far we have found all the necessary solutions. I'm sure we'll find it as well.
So there are solutions.
Yeah, I think reflecting on the discussion, it really shows how energy is a key part of sovereignty in Europe. And we need to be able to provide Europe with energy. And if I look at like this missing part in the energy mix, then that's fusion energy, because fusion energy, it's CO2 free, it's safe, it's reliable, but it's also bandwidth. So you can run it 24/7, you can run it exactly where you have the data centers or also where you have the big industrial locations. And if I look at Germany, we are an industrial location, but our industrial locations are often not at the place where we currently can produce the energy. And having fusion or renewable energies and having fusion energy right next to a chemical plant, right next to a steel plant, would really relieve all the pressure we have on the grid right now. And for me, that's really the missing part in the energy system in combination with the renewables. So renewables plus fusion energy could really be the key towards energy sovereignty for Europe and the key to keeping the industrial base of Germany, what I believe is like the basis of our prosperity, wealth, peace, and so on.
Nevertheless, there is no fusion energy yet, and it will still take some time until we actually get there. So right now, we feel like it will be a good solution for the future, but there is no solution yet. So what we do need is a lot long-term thinking and a lot of long-term commitment towards those kind of energy ideas and solutions. Right now we have some sort of commitment. But do you feel confident that this commitment actually goes on past this legislation? Because we've seen what happens when someone like Trump comes into power, then that can change all along.
Maybe just commenting on the timeline of fusion. That is always obviously the big elephant in the room, right? But I think right now there has to really been a paradigm shift if we look at fusion. Especially laser fusion has demonstrated energy gain in December of 2022 in a national lab in the US. So we have demonstrated in laser fusion that it is possible to produce energy. Now it's about commercializing this and bringing this to scale and into power plants. And if I look at recent studies, then there is a study from the Fusion Industry Association amongst companies and experts that where 70% of them believe to see fusion power plants on the grid in the next 10 years. And I think if there's a possibility for technology with like 70% to be there in the next 10 years, then Germany needs to have the ambition to be there. And on your question, yes, can a new government change something in 4 years? Yes, of course they can, but and I think it's like we need to do everything we can right now. We've been talking about speed and the 3 months and so on, to put everything in place to really get Germany up and running there. And even talking about Trump, even though he said like trill, baby, trill and oil, he didn't cut the budget for fusion energy. And the new head of the Secretary of Energy in the US also pointed out how important fusion energy will be for the US. So even someone like the new administration in the US didn't change the support for fusion energy.
Well, we're going to kind of hope that we're never going to get a government in Germany similar to Trump. So and we hope this is just a very this future discussion that's never going to happen. Anyway, what I wanted to ask is like Black Semiconductor, you want to grow. You actually, what I find interesting is like you're just going to say like we're probably not going to need that much energy consumption because we're just going to bring it down, which is a good point. But what does it take you? And we need companies like yours in Germany to be on going back to strategic autonomy. What hinders you to scale up even more here in Europe right now?
First of all, let's talk about the advantages here. We have the advantage that we have a very strong research basis, which is exactly what made that entire development possible. So without the research, it would never have happened. And the research was, like I said, 10 years, and it was 1 billion. So it was a lot of money focused on a very specific new material system. That was actually worth a Nobel Prize, that material system. Okay, so number one, this is where we come from. Now, what do we need as a next step is help funds to allocate large amount of capital in a comparably risky stage. That's exactly the trick that is for Marvel Fusion very important, and this is for us important, for others that, for example, in building rockets or what is very comparable. You need a lot of capital to solve a technical problem, and you only know if it works if it's working. You have, of course, a certain evidence that it actually should work, and that's why you can raise the capital and justify and say, okay, look, there's a certain risk, but hey, it should work. And this is where I think regulatory boundaries can be removed so that more capital can be allocated into such high risk.
Okay, just before we come to you, just one question. It's like, because you just make sure regulatory, you mentioned regulatory issues. Where do you want the money to come from? Public investors, private European investors, private American investors, private Chinese investors? I mean, it's different.
Sure. I think pension funds should be really enabled to allocate more of their funds to...
The European pension funds?
For example, yes. Mm-hmm. And that, if that flows into an investment ecosystem, and that's exactly... These are the people that know how to do due diligence on these opportunities and find out the ones that have a good chance to survive. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the German taxpayer should really spend money on these opportunities every single year. Imagine how Google started, and in Meta and so on. If we do that frequently enough, it's just a number of scale. And if we as a taxpayer spend enough money and make enough of these opportunities happen, chances that something big will emerge is really, really realistic.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just, we all need funding, we all need capital, but I think what we see is that we're trying to develop new value chains. And that's very important, that there are value chains. And where we have succeeded is where we have someone taking an architect role, making sure that the whole value chain is coordinated and funded. There's a lot of chicken and egg situations. Do you build the EV infrastructure, charging stations before you force the car manufacturers to develop the cars? And in the CCS business, do you fund the emitters to capture their CO2 before you have a storage, or before you have the onshore infrastructure, or you have the shipping available? So having someone taking that architect role is where we have succeeded. We've invested in 2 full-scale CCS projects, and the one where the Norwegian government took that coordinating role, and another one in the UK. Where we struggle is when we come to EU, because is it EU or is it the local, countries who's going to play that role? And we struggle to see who steps up and actually takes that role.
I wanted to comment on the funding point that you just made. I've recently seen a graph that showed the 10 most valuable companies of Germany, where SAP is the youngest one, 52 years old. 10 most valuable companies of the US have all been founded afterwards. And they're not only software, right? There's software, there's hardware, there's everything. And 9 of these 10 are VC-backed. And where's the VC money coming from in the US? A big portion of that is pension funds, is endowments, and so on. So there is if you look at that, there is a real issue. If we say we have the ambition to build big companies here, if we say we have the ambition to build deep tech companies, then we need to solve this funding topic, otherwise that's not going to happen. And I think the second point, if you also look then again at all of these successful companies in the US, a lot of them had initial funding from APA-E, DARPA, APA-H, and so on. Now we have the Agency for Disruptive Innovation in Germany, Sprint, which I think is an important first step to get there as well. But if I look at the budget of Sprint compared to the budget of these US agencies, then the budget of Sprint currently is, I think, 200 million per year, and combined budget of them is 10 billion. So we have a factor of 20 in between. So I think we need to solve these 2 things. First, get bigger VC funds here in Europe to also enable VC-backed funding for companies, and then, give bigger budgets to these agencies like Sprint, who are doing an amazing work.
Well, how about your pension funds?
That is something which I really wanted to comment on that as well. I have to agree with everybody else who mentioned this issue, and I think this is one of the critical missing elements for us as a continent, as a European Union, to have that access of capital to the technological advancing companies. And I think something which I think we missed to carry that message, it works in 2 ways. One, we have to do institutional setup as convenient as possible for those institutional investors to come in and be accessible to our companies. We're doing everything possible at national level. There's also a bill in Parliament to be voted by Monday next week, but this is just a national thing. But generally and strategically thinking, it is of really critical importance for us to have that funding available here, and we have to carry a message. Because when you look at startup technological young companies now in Europe, in Lithuania, in other European countries, we see this massive potential. We have deep tech companies like that evolving with new technological advancement. We want to make sure that these companies continue to work here, but not take a leapfrog across the Atlantic to the other side, right? This is of our importance, and a critical answer of that is pension funds and other capital investments.
But before I come to you, because you also want to mention, I mean, you're in and out of Brussels often, I guess, or often enough anyway. So seriously, that problem has been out there for a while. Yeah. What makes you certain that we actually get to solve it?
I'm not certain at the moment. I have to admit, I am not certain. But one thing I see happening at the moment, I see that alignment that others talked about between what is happening in the European Commission, what is happening at national governments. We're happy to say there's a presidency of European Council coming up as well, and the current Polish one, and the leadership of Germany. I see a lot of alignment and competitiveness with a clear understanding of what needs to be done is getting aligned. So this is giving a very solid foundation for us not to miss this step, but it's critical not to miss it. And implementation, especially in Brussels, has always been a problem. We always had good strategies. We always had good paperwork done, but the issue of implementation has always been a key, critical one. And now we have a good moment in time to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see we're running out of time, and I could talk for hours about funding, but my pet peeve is the innovation fund. It never gives enough money. It gives a little bit of money, it sprinkles it here and there to keep people happy, but it never gives deep enough funding to actually get projects over the finishing line. So, yeah.
Okay, last question, because we're out of time. Do you feel like this is because there is not enough money, or do you feel like because there is not enough strong belief into that certain area, whatever technology it is?
I don't think it's coordinated enough.
Okay.
I think, I see it from the CCS. We need concentrated customers in one area. EU is spreading it out to, different capture projects all over Europe, and they're not connected. They're not coordinated in timing or anything.
And not prioritized enough.
And it's just too little. And I think when you look at deep tech, we invest in a lot of venture companies as well. And there's initial funding, but the funding to scale up and commercialize it, that's the valley of death, I guess. And that's where you miss or you lose all the different companies. So, I could go on.
Thank you very much for joining us right now. And I'll see you back after the lunch break. Thank you.